10. I calmed a terrifying alpha werewolf. Then everyone told me I was already his mate. BL stories. YouTube transcripts. I calmed a terrifying alpha werewolf. Then everyone told me I was already his mate. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss any of our channel's new videos. It is quick, it is free, and it is one of the best ways to support us as we continue bringing you more dramatic, emotional, and unforgettable stories like this one. Your support truly means the world to us. Before we begin, tell us in the comments where in the world you are watching from and what time it is where you are right now. We love seeing how far these stories travel and discovering who is joining us from around the world today. Now, let's begin today's story. Do not move, I whispered, even though every person in Moonhaven Square was already running away. The alpha werewolf stood beneath the silver lanterns of the moon gathering. Nearly 7 feet tall in his transformed state, his dark fur catching the cold light while frightened voices echoed across the square. I knew exactly who he was. Everyone did. Rowan Vale, leader of the Vale Pack, was the alpha parents warned their children never to approach when the moon was high. They called him terrifying, cursed, impossible to control. Yet, as I watched him from 20 feet away, I noticed something everyone else seemed to miss. Rowan was not chasing anyone. He was backing away from them, his claws pressed into the earth, as if he were using every ounce of strength to remain still. "Elliot, get back," someone shouted. I should have listened. I was an Omega with no special rank, no powerful family, and certainly no experience calming an alpha werewolf. But fear did not explain what I saw in Rowan's pale gray eyes. There was awareness there, and beneath it, something far more human. He was afraid of himself. I stepped closer. Rowan released a warning growl, but I stopped only long enough to study him. My mother had taught me an old phrase when I was a child. Word she claimed came from a forgotten moon language. I had never understood why she insisted I remember them. Now they returned without effort. "The moon sees the wolf," I said softly, "but the soul chooses the path." Rowan froze. The square became strangely quiet. A warm sensation moved through my chest, pure and gentle, like moonlight somehow given weight. I repeated the ancient words. Rowan's breathing slowed. His shoulders relaxed. The frightening wildness in his eyes gradually disappeared until he was simply looking at me. Not through me, at me. Then he lowered his head. An alpha werewolf feared throughout Moonhaven had responded to an unknown Omega speaking a language almost nobody remembered. I heard footsteps behind me as several pack elders cautiously returned. "How did you do that?" one asked. I talked to him. The oldest elder stared at my wrist. I followed his gaze and saw a thin silver crescent glowing against my skin. My stomach tightened. "What is that?" Nobody answered. Rowan shifted back into his human form beneath the protection of a ceremonial cloak brought by one of his attendants. He was tall, dark-haired, and far less frightening than every story had promised. His gray eyes remained fixed on me with the same bewilderment I felt. "Who are you?" he asked. "Elliot Hayes." At the sound of my name, the silver mark brightened. A matching light appeared around an old symbol on Rowan's hand. Suddenly, every elder in the square went silent. "What?" I demanded. "Why is everyone looking at me?" The oldest elder stepped forward, his expression caught somewhere between wonder and disbelief. "Because those marks have not appeared together in more than 200 years. I looked from him to Rowan. "What does that mean?" Rowan seemed equally determined to hear the answer. The elder lowered his voice. "It means the moon already recognized your bond." My heart stumbled. "What bond?" The elder stared directly at me. "Elliot, how can you not know? You're already his mate." The words "already his mate" should have explained something, but to Elliot, they only created a dozen new questions. The moon gathering had nearly emptied, leaving silver lanterns swaying above the square, while the elders surrounded him and Rowan at a cautious distance. Elliot looked at the glowing crescent on his wrist, then at the matching symbol on Rowan's hand. "No," Elliot said. The oldest elder blinked. "No, you told me what the mark means. You did not tell me why it gets to decide my life." A few elders exchanged uneasy looks. Rowan remained silent. Elliot expected the powerful alpha to claim the bond or demand obedience to pack tradition. Instead, Rowan turned toward the elders. He is right. Everyone stared at him. Rowan's voice was calm now. Nothing like the frightening presence that had filled the square minutes earlier. A mark is not permission. If Elliot does not choose this bond, nobody will pressure him into accepting it. Elliot studied him with surprise. You believe that? I've spent most of my life being told what I am because of something inside me I did not choose. Rowan glanced toward the moon. I will not do the same to you. For the first time, Ellie understood why the stories about Rowan had always sounded incomplete. The pack described him as dangerous. But danger was not what Elliot saw. He saw discipline, restraint, loneliness. The oldest elder reluctantly agreed to postpone any formal declaration, but asked Elliot to remain near the Vale estate until they understood why the ancient mate marks had returned. Elliot accepted for one reason only. He wanted answers. Later that night, he sat in the estate library surrounded by dusty records while Rowan stood several feet away, deliberately giving him space. Does this happen often? Elliot asked, losing control. Rowan's expression tightened. More often than I would like, and everyone runs. Usually, Elliot looked down at the silver crescent. I did not calm you because of this mark. I know how. Rowan considered the question. Because he did not command me. You reminded me that I could choose. The answer stayed with Elliot. He opened an old pack chronicle and searched for the phrase his mother had taught him, but found nothing. Then Rowan suddenly gripped the edge of the table. His breathing changed. The silver mark on Elliot's wrist warmed instantly. Rowan, stay back. Elliot did not move closer. Instead, he repeated the ancient words from across the room. The moon sees the wolf, but the soul chooses the path. Rowan closed his eyes. Within seconds, the tension left his shoulders. Elliot stared at his wrist. The mark had responded before Rowan showed any obvious sign of distress. That was not romance. It was information. This bond can sense you, Elliot said. Rowan opened his eyes. Apparently, Elliot pulled another book from the shelf. Then we stop asking what the elders think it means and find out what it actually means. Rowan gave him the faintest smile. You always argue with ancient traditions. Only when they start making decisions for me. They searched until after midnight. Finally, Elliot discovered a page written in the same forgotten language his mother had taught him. Most of it was damaged, but one sentence remained clear. He translated it slowly. When the sacred voice returns, the bound wolf shall remember himself. Rowan stepped closer, his expression changing. Elliot continued reading and found a second line almost erased beneath it. The mate is not the master's chain. The mate is the mirror of choice. Then he noticed a royal crest stamped at the bottom of the page. One name remained beside it. Prince Caleb Vale. Rowan went completely still. That is impossible, he whispered. Elliot looked up. Why? Rowan's gray eyes filled with an emotion Elliot had not seen before. Because Caleb was my younger brother, and he disappeared 20 years ago. For several seconds, Rowan said nothing. The name Caleb seemed to change the air inside the library, turning an ancient mystery into something painfully personal. Elliot closed the book carefully. You said he disappeared. Rowan nodded. He was 9. I was 16. The elders told my family he wandered beyond the northern boundary during a moon festival and was never found. Elliot studied the royal crest beneath Caleb's name. Then why is he mentioned in a document about sacred voices and mate bonds? Rowan had no answer. They spent the rest of the night searching older pack records. And shortly before sunrise, Elliot found something stranger. Every official history described Rowan's unstable transformations as an inherited alpha condition. Yet the earliest medical record was dated only 3 days after Caleb vanished. Your conditions started after his disappearance, Elliot said. Rowan stared at the date. I never connected them. Maybe everyone made sure you would not. Rowan's expression darkened with thought. Elliot turned another page and discovered a private statement written by a former pack physician. It described Rowan not as naturally unstable, but as carrying an ancient burden voluntarily transferred to him during a royal emergency. Elliot looked up. You knew about this? Rowan was silent for a long moment. Not all of it. He moved toward the window where dawn was beginning to color the sky. That night, I remember the elders telling me something was spreading through the pack. They said my alpha blood could contain it. I agreed because people were frightened. Elliot suddenly understood. You took the burden into yourself. Rowan nodded. Afterward, the transformations became harder to control. Elliot felt anger rise, not at Rowan, but at the story Moonhaven had built around him. For 20 years, people had whispered that Rowan was dangerous without remembering why he had become that way. They call you terrifying because you protected them. Rowan gave a humorless smile. People remember what frightens them more easily than what saved them. That does not make their version true. Rowan turned toward him. Something softened in his gray eyes. Elliot realized that everyone else seemed to approach Rowan as either a leader to obey or a threat to avoid. Elliot could do neither. He wanted to understand him. They continued searching until they found a sealed letter hidden behind the physician's report. It contained no explanation, only a sentence written in the same ancient moon language Elliot somehow understood. The burden shall remain with the Elder Prince until the sacred voice returns. Rowan read the translated words twice. Elder Prince you, Elliot said, which means Caleb's disappearance, your condition, and whatever happened to me in the square are connected. Rowan stepped closer to the table, but stopped several feet from Elliot. Even now, he respected the distance Elliot had chosen. You should leave Moonhaven, Rowan said quietly. Elliot frowned. Why? Because if this bond is connected to whatever happened 20 years ago, staying near me may pull you into something you never asked for. Elliot considered him for a moment. You keep trying to protect everyone by deciding what burden you should carry alone. Rowan looked surprised. And you keep correcting me. Someone should. A genuine smile briefly appeared on Rowan's face. Elliot returned to the book and noticed a faint silver symbol beneath the letter. When he touched it, warmth moved through his fingers. New words slowly appeared across the page. Rowan watched in disbelief. Elliot read them aloud. When the still moon voice awakens, seek the prince who remembers. Below the sentence was a map symbol pointing toward the western forest. Then one final line appeared. The lost prince lives. The words, the lost prince's lives remained visible for less than a minute before fading from the page, but Elliot no longer needed to see them. He had memorized every symbol. Rowan stood motionless beside the table, staring at the place where his brother's name had appeared. For 20 years, he had been taught to mourn Caleb as someone who could never return. Now, an ancient message was telling him that grief itself might have been built on a lie. We follow the map, Elliot said. Rowan looked at him. Not until we understand what happened to you when you touched that page. Elliot wanted to argue, but Rowan was right. The silver crescent on his wrist was still glowing. They searched the oldest shelves until Elliot discovered a thin volume sealed with the same crescent symbol. The cover named a forgotten tradition called the Still Moon Voice. According to the text, it was neither a weapon nor a form of control. It was described as a pure and sacred gift that allowed its bearer to speak through the ancient moon language to the conscious mind beneath a werewolf's strongest instincts. That is why you could hear me in the square, Elliot said. Rowan read the translated passage beside him. You did not suppress the wolf. No, I reminded you that you were still there. Another passage warned that the gift could never force obedience. It worked only when the person hearing it chose to respond. Elliot felt unexpectedly relieved. Whatever existed between them, he did not want power over Rowan. He wanted Rowan to have power over himself. The next page contained an illustration of two silver marks identical to theirs. Elliot expected another explanation of mate bonds, but the text described something more complicated. The marks appeared when two souls possessed the potential to create balance. Yet recognition did not guarantee love. Potential, Elliot said, not destiny. Rowan nodded slowly. That sounds considerably less terrifying than the Eller's version. Elliot smiled. You're the terrifying one, remember? Apparently, I have competition from ancient grammar. Their shared laughter was brief, but it changed something between them. Elliot had spent less than a day with Rowan. Yet, he was beginning to understand the quiet man hidden beneath 20 years of fearful stories. Rowan listened before speaking. He respected boundaries even when tradition told him he had authority. Most importantly, he never treated Elliot's Omega status as weakness. By afternoon, they brought the still moon text before the elders. Several recognized the book, but claimed its teachings had been abandoned generations ago. When Elliot asked why, nobody gave a clear answer. Finally, the oldest elder admitted that large sections of early pack history had been removed after a royal decree nearly 2 centuries earlier. Removed for what reason? Rowan asked. To preserve order. Elliot frowned. Order from what? The elder hesitated. From bonds the later councils considered unacceptable. He explained that the oldest moon records recognized sacred partnerships without restricting them by gender or secondary status. Male alpha romance had once appeared openly in royal histories alongside other bonds, until later leaders erased those accounts and narrowed the meaning of mate. Rowan's expression became cold with disappointment. So we did not inherit the whole tradition. We inherited somebody's edited version. Elliot thought about his mother teaching him forbidden words without ever explaining why. Then he noticed an inscription inside the back cover. The letters were tiny, almost invisible. He translated them slowly. When fear rewrites love, seek the sanctuary where the first moon still speaks. Beneath the sentence was the same Western symbol from Caleb's hidden message. But there was something else, a handwritten note beside it, dated 20 years earlier. Elliot recognized the name immediately. Caleb Vale. The message contained only 6 words. Rowan must never believe he is cursed. Rowan read Caleb's message so many times that Elliot wondered whether the words might somehow change if he stared long enough. They did not. Rowan must never believe he is cursed. For 20 years, Rowan had built his life around the opposite belief. He had treated every difficult transformation as proof that something inside him was broken, while Moonhaven treated his restraint as something temporary and his fearsome reputation as inevitable. Elliot closed the book gently. Caleb knew the truth. Rowan looked toward the Western symbol beneath the message. I need to know why he left me believing a lie. The question carried no anger, only the exhaustion of someone discovering that his deepest fear might never have belonged to him. The following morning, Elliot and Rowan began reconstructing the hidden map from 3 separate moon texts. Each contained fragments disguised as decorative symbols, but Elliot's still moon voice allowed him to recognize patterns the other scholars had missed. By noon, the route pointed toward a mountain sanctuary almost 150 miles west of Moonhaven. Before they could leave, however, Elliot discovered another sealed record beneath Caleb's original royal registry. It described the night the prince vanished. Caleb had been born with an unusual sensitivity to the ancient moon language. As a child, he could recognize when sacred texts had been altered, even when he had never studied their original form. That ability had led him to a forbidden archive beneath the Vale estate where he discovered that the royal bloodline had once maintained a covenant with the ancient wolves. The covenant was not about domination. It required royal alphas to protect free choice within every sacred bond. When later councils began rewriting mate laws and erasing male alpha romance from official history, the covenant weakened. Rowan's condition had begun when the damage bond between the royal line and the ancient wolves reached a breaking point. So you were never the source. Elliot said, you became the shield. Rowan read the passage beside him, and Caleb knew. Another record revealed that on the night of Caleb's disappearance, the younger prince had tried to restore the covenant. The ritual could not be completed because one element was missing, the still moon voice. To prevent the fractured sacred bond from spreading through the pack, Rowan had accepted its burden temporarily. He had been 16, frightened, and willing to help. The temporary burden had lasted 20 years. Elliot felt the silver mark on his wrist grow warm. You have been carrying an unfinished promise. Rowan gave a quiet nod. That sounds better than curse. It is also more accurate. Rowan looked at him with the faint smile Elliot was beginning to recognize. You really cannot resist correcting language. Apparently, Language keeps causing problems around here. They found one final note written in Caleb's hand. If the still moon voice returns, do not bring an army. Do not bring the council. Bring Rowan, and let him choose whether he wants the truth. Elliot understood immediately. Caleb had not left instructions for an alpha leader. He had left instructions for his brother. Rowan stared toward the distant western mountains visible beyond the library windows. We leave tomorrow. Elliot nodded together. Rowan turned to him. You do not owe me this because of the mate mark. I know. Then why come? Elliot considered the question carefully because everyone else decided what your story meant before they understood it. I want to know the truth. Rowan's expression softened. And after that, Elliot looked at the silver crescent on his wrist. After that, we decide what we mean to each other ourselves. As sunset filled the library with pale gold, the ancient map suddenly shimmered beneath Elliot's hand. A hidden line appeared at its western edge written in Caleb's unmistakable script. The Lost Prince had left them one final warning. The sanctuary will open only for the sacred voice and the wolf who chooses not to rule it. The road west took Elliot and Rowan through 2 days of pine-covered hills before the familiar lights of Moonhaven disappeared completely behind them. They traveled without elders, guards, or royal attendants, exactly as Caleb had instructed. Elliot expected the silence between them to feel awkward, but instead it became strangely comfortable. Rowan never treated the journey as proof that Elliot had accepted their mate bond. He asked before making decisions that affected them both, listened when Elliot disagreed, and never once used his position as alpha to end an argument. By the second evening, Elliot understood something the old histories had failed to explain. Balance did not mean one person becoming weaker so another could feel strong. It meant neither person needed to become smaller. They stopped beside a quiet mountain lake as moonlight spread across the water. Rowan studied the silver mark on his hand. When I was younger, I thought being an alpha meant never admitting fear. Elliot sat beside him. Who taught you that? Almost everyone. They were wrong. Rowan smiled faintly. You say that with impressive confidence. I have evidence. Rowan looked toward him, and for a moment, the ancient mystery surrounding them felt less important than the simple trust growing between them. What are you afraid of? Rowan asked. Elliot considered pretending he had no answer. That this bond will make every choice afterward feel questionable. If I care about you, how do I know it is really me choosing? Rowan was quiet before answering. Then do not choose me until you know. Elliot stared at him. Rowan continued. If the moon itself appeared tomorrow and ordered you to become my mate, I would still ask what you wanted. The silver crescent on Elliot's wrist warmed, but this time he did not look at it. That helps, he admitted. The next morning, they reached the western mountains and found a stone path hidden beneath centuries of moss. Ancient symbols guided them toward a narrow valley where a white arch stood between 2 enormous cedar trees. Elliot recognized the inscription immediately. The sanctuary opens for the sacred voice and the wolf who chooses not to rule it. Rowan stepped forward first, but nothing happened. Elliot joined him. Still nothing. Maybe there is another translation, Rowan said. Elliot examined the final symbol and realized the word translated as rule could also mean possess. He looked at Rowan. It is asking whether you claim me because of the bond. Rowan faced the arch. I claim nothing Elliot has not freely given. Silver light moved across the stone. The entrance opened. Beyond it stood an ancient library carved into the mountain. Shelves stretched farther than Elliot could see, filled with records untouched by the rewritten laws of Moonhaven. On the nearest wall were portraits of sacred partners from centuries past. Omega and Alpha, Beta and Alpha, and 2 male alphas standing proudly together beneath the same moon crest. Male alpha romance had not been tolerated in the old world. It had been honored. Elliot moved closer to the portrait. They erased all of this. Not all of it. A voice answered from the shadows. Rowan froze. A tall man with familiar gray eyes stepped into the moonlight. He looked older than the child Rowan remembered, but the resemblance between them was unmistakable. Rowan could barely speak. Caleb, the man smiled, his eyes filling with emotion. Hello, brother. Rowan stood perfectly still as 20 years of unanswered questions seemed to gather between them. Caleb looked at Elliot next. "And you must be the still moon voice." Elliot nodded. "Why did you disappear?" Caleb's smile faded. "Because someone had to protect the truth until Rowan was ready to choose it freely." Rowan finally found his voice. "Choose what?" Caleb turned toward a sealed silver door at the end of the archive. "Whether to remain the terrifying alpha everyone taught you to fear, or learn what your wolf was always meant to be." Rowan stared at the sealed silver door, but he did not move toward it. Instead, he turned to Caleb. "Before I choose anything, tell me why you let me believe you were gone." Caleb lowered his eyes. "Because the sanctuary had one law I could not break. Once I became guardian of the First Moon archive, I could leave clues, but I could not directly contact the royal line until the still moon voice returned. If I had revealed myself earlier, the ancient covenant would have remained sealed, and the council would have buried the truth again." Rowan absorbed the answer slowly. "So, you were waiting for Elliot. I was waiting for someone who could open what I could only protect." Caleb placed his palm against the silver door. Symbols appeared across its surface, and Elliot immediately understood them. The covenant was never created to control werewolves. It existed to preserve balance between instinct and choice, authority and freedom, alpha strength and personal dignity. Caleb explained that generations of leaders had gradually rewritten that principle. Mate bonds became obligations. Rank became entitlement. Relationships that did not fit later expectations disappeared from official history. When the covenant weakened, its sacred burden sought someone from the royal alpha line capable of containing it. 16-year-old Rowan had volunteered without understanding the cost. "Your wolf was never cursed," Caleb said. "It has been carrying the imbalance of an entire broken promise." Rowan looked almost relieved, but Elliot saw sadness beneath it. 20 years of shame could not disappear because of one explanation. Elliot stepped beside him. "You were never what people called you." Rowan gave him a quiet look. "I still frighten them." Fear describes their experience. It does not define your character. Caleb smiled faintly. "That sounds like the still moon voice, even when you were speaking ordinary English." Elliot looked toward the door. "How do we restore the covenant?" Caleb's expression became serious. The old ritual required two forces. A royal wolf willing to surrender control over another person's choice, and a sacred voice willing to guide without commanding. Rowan immediately understood. "Elliot and me potentially," Caleb replied. "But the ritual will fail if either of you participates because you believe the mate bond requires it." Elliot appreciated the distinction. Even ancient magic apparently needed better boundaries than Moonhaven's modern elders. The silver door opened, revealing a circular chamber beneath an opening in the mountain ceiling. Moonlight fell across a stone table holding the first moon record. Elliot approached it and read the oldest definition of mate. His breath caught. "Rowan, they translated it wrong." Rowan almost laughed. "Of course they did." Elliot read aloud. "A mate is not one soul owned by another. A mate is one soul recognized as capable of walking beside another if both choose the road." Caleb nodded. Recognition was never a command. Rowan looked at Elliot, and the meaning of their silver marks finally became clear. The moon had not married them. It had merely introduced a possibility. Elliot felt an unexpected warmth at that thought. Their conversations, trust, and growing affection belonged to them, not prophecy. Then Caleb turned the first moon record to its final preserved page. There, beneath the original covenant, were dozens of names deliberately removed from later copies. Several belonged to male alpha couples who had served as sacred companions, guardians, teachers, and leaders. Their love had once been part of the foundation of Moonhaven. Elliot traced the faded letters with his eyes. "This changes everything." "Only if people are allowed to know," Caleb said. Rowan looked toward the open door and then at his brother. "We take the archive home." Caleb shook his head. "The archive stays protected, but the first moon record can return with you." Rowan understood the challenge immediately. Restoring the covenant would not be enough. He would have to stand before the same people who feared him and reveal that generations of law had been built upon edited history. Elliot reached for the sacred record, but the silver mark on his wrist suddenly shone brighter than ever. New words appeared across the final page. The covenant can be restored only when the recognized pair faces the moon before their people and answers one question freely. Elliot read the question, then looked at Rowan. If destiny released you from this bond tonight, would you still choose each other tomorrow? The question followed Elliot all the way back to Moonhaven. After 2 days on the Eastern Road, he and Rowan returned with Caleb beside them, and the first moon record protected beneath Rowan's coat. Word of the Lost Prince's return spread before they reached the Vale estate, and by sunset, the moon gathering square was filled with elders, families, scholars, and pack leaders demanding answers. Rowan could have spoken first. Instead, he stepped aside and let Caleb tell the truth of his disappearance, the hidden sanctuary, and the ancient covenant. Then Elliot opened the first moon record and explained what the earliest laws actually said. Mate bonds had once recognized possibility, not ownership. Sacred partnerships had never been restricted by gender or secondary status. Male alpha couples had stood openly among Moonhaven's honored companions until later councils erased their names and narrowed the meaning of the bond. Some listeners accepted the evidence immediately. Others looked uncomfortable. One elder finally said, "Whatever happened centuries ago, our laws have preserved order." Elliot met his gaze. Order is not the same as truth. Another elder turned to Rowan. "You're the alpha. You can settle this. Accept the omega as your mate. Complete the bond, and the pack will follow." Rowan's expression became calm in a way Elliot had learned meant his decision was already made. "No." The square fell silent. The moon recognized Elliot and me. Rowan continued, "But recognition does not give me ownership of him. His choice belongs to him, even if that choice is not me." Elliot felt the silver crescent on his wrist grow warm. The elder frowned. "Then you would reject destiny?" "I would reject any version of destiny that requires Elliot to surrender his freedom." Rowan turned toward him. There was no command in his gray eyes. No expectation hidden behind alpha authority. "If you walk away tonight, I will still be grateful you reminded me that I was never cursed." That was the moment Elliot finally understood what he had been trying to separate for days. The bond had not created Rowan's patience. It had not created his kindness, his restraint, or the quiet humor Elliot had discovered on the Western Road. The moon had not forced Rowan to respect him. Rowan had chosen those things every time. He could have chosen differently. Elliot stepped forward. "I was afraid that if I chose you, I would never know whether the choice was mine." Rowan waited. "Now I know." Elliot held out his hand. "I choose you, Rowan. Not because the moon told me to. Because when everyone called you terrifying, you were still more concerned about frightening them than proving your strength. Because you listened to me when tradition said you did not have to. And because you would let me leave." Rowan took Elliot's hand gently. "Then I choose you for the same reason I trusted you that first night. You saw the wolf, but you spoke to the man." Silver light moved across both their marks. The first moon record opened by itself, revealing the ancient question. Caleb read it aloud. "If destiny released you from this bond tonight, would you still choose each other tomorrow?" Rowan answered first. "Yes." Elliot smiled. "Yes." Nothing dramatic happened at first. Then Rowan closed his eyes, and the tension he had carried for 20 years seemed to leave his shoulders. The silver marks remained, but their lights softened from a warning into something peaceful. Caleb looked toward the first moon record. "The covenant is restored." Rowan opened his eyes. They were clear. For the first time, Elliot sensed no hidden struggle behind them. Around the square, the ancient moon symbols carved into the stones began glowing one after another, revealing names that generations had tried to erase. Male alpha companions, omega leaders, beta scholars, and forgotten partners returned beneath the same sacred crest. The crowd stared as Moonhaven's lost history appeared beneath their feet. Elliot looked at Rowan. The terrifying alpha had not been saved by obedience, and Elliot had not been rewarded for submission. They had restored something older and wiser by doing the one thing centuries of rewritten law had forgotten to protect. They had chosen each other freely. 3 years later, Moonhaven still told stories about Rowan Vale, but nobody called him cursed anymore. Children knew him as the alpha who opened the old archives to every family in the pack. Scholars knew him as the leader who encouraged questions instead of fearing them. And the elders had learned that preserving tradition meant understanding its truth rather than protecting every mistake inherited from the past. Rowan remained powerful, and his werewolf form could still silence a crowded square simply by appearing. But the fear that once surrounded him had changed into respect. He no longer treated his wolf as an enemy hidden inside himself. The restored covenant had taught him what Elliot had understood from the beginning. Instinct was part of him, but choice defined him. Elliot's life changed as well. He became keeper of the still moon voice, not because he wanted authority, but because too many sacred words had already been lost through silence. He worked with Caleb to translate the first Moon archive and restore the names removed from Moonhaven's history. Records of Omega leaders returned to the public library. Forgotten Beta scholars received recognition for their work. The stories of male Alpha companions once erased because later generations considered their love unacceptable were restored beside every other sacred partnership. Caleb never reclaimed the life people expected a lost prince to want. Instead, he divided his time between Moonhaven and the Western Sanctuary, protecting the oldest records while teaching younger scholars how easily history could become prejudice when nobody questioned who had written it. Elliot often reminded him that disappearing for 20 years remained an unnecessarily dramatic teaching method. Caleb always replied that the Vale family had a reputation to maintain. Rowan usually pretended not to hear. The greatest change, however, happened in ordinary moments. Elliot and Rowan built their relationship slowly after the covenant was restored. The silver marks remained on their hands, but neither man treated them as instructions. They disagreed about books, schedules, council meetings, and whether Rowan's habit of drinking coffee after midnight was responsible behavior. They also listened. Rowan never used alpha authority to silence Elliot, and Elliot never used the still moon voice to control Rowan. The sacred gift was reserved for moments when Rowan genuinely needed help finding calm, and even then, Elliot offered guidance rather than command. One autumn evening, they returned to Moonhaven Square for the annual moon gathering. Elliot remembered standing there years earlier, while everyone ran from a terrifying alpha werewolf. Now families filled the square beneath silver lanterns, and Rowan stood comfortably among them. A young Omega approached Elliot and asked, "Is it true the moon chose Rowan for you?" Elliot glanced toward Rowan, who was listening from several feet away. "Not exactly," Elliot answered. The moon recognized a possibility. The young Omega frowned. "What is the difference?" Rowan walked over with a quiet smile. Elliot reached for his hand. "Possibility opens a door. You still decide whether to walk through it." Rowan's silver mark warmed against Elliot's palm. Above them, the full moon illuminated words newly carved into the center of the square from the first moon record. No sacred bond exists without freedom. Elliot looked around at the place where fear had once controlled the story people told about Rowan. The lost prince had returned. The erased lovers had recovered their names. The ancient covenant had been restored. Yet Elliot understood that the greatest miracle was simpler than any of those things. He had never tamed a terrifying wolf. He had listened to a man everyone else had stopped trying to understand. And Rowan had listened back. Destiny might have introduced them. Ancient magic might have recognized them. And history might remember them. But love belonged to neither prophecy nor tradition.